everybody. This is Teen Title Talk with Aaron and guest host Liz. This is the podcast
where two librarians discuss two YA books every 2 weeks.
Today, my usual co-host Courtney is out. Hopefully she's having a baby, though I'm doubting it. I'm sorry, Courtney. If you're listening to this, I really hope it's out by now. In the meantime, my coworker Liz has volunteered to step in. Thank you so much for being here, Liz.
Happy to be here. I am the reference librarian at the Derry Public Library. I also host Liz's Movie Picks.
That's right.
And I work with Aaron multiple times a week.
Today we'll be doing the same old thing. We're going to be talking first about memories and then about books. Liz, what did you read this time?
I read My Family Divided by Diane Guerrero. She wrote it with Erica Moroz.
Nice. And I read Don't Call Me Crazy, 33 Voices Start the Conversation About Mental Health, and that's edited by Kelly Jensen. But first, we're going to dip into the bin and get some teen questions. So here we go. All right, the first question, Liz, is, and this will be a good way to get to know you a little bit. What was your favorite show as a teen?
So, I guess there's two different eras. Early teens, it would be classic Simpsons, so like seasons 1 through 8.
Sure.
Daria. The only show on MTV my mother would let me watch. Mm-hmm. Everything else she was like, no. But she saw Daria. She's like, oh, that's a good show. Keep watching it.
And that was younger when you were
younger,
like 13.
And The Critic, which kind of got me into watching movies. And then when I was like older teen, like 16 and up, it would be Will and Grace. That was Appointment TV. Mystery Science Theater 3000 reruns.
Gotcha.
And Shocking Nobody, the anime Cowboy Bebop.
That does shock me. No, it doesn't.
No one is shocked.
I'm not shocked at all. But so you obviously had cable or something like it.
Cable and no friends.
I love it. I had a much sadder television experience because I lived on a mountain and I either had no cable or it was out of the price range or something. To actually get it to us was hard. I don't know. I had Channel 3, which I think usually was CBS.
Oh, so you got to watch Next Gen.
Yeah. And, I don't know even what my favorite shows were. I remember there was another station that came in pretty fuzzy, and then I could watch TGIF. But that was like, we had to get the antennas just right, and we could watch Sabrina and Boy Meets World. But yeah, I think CSI probably was my later, one I regularly watched. Or whatever came on after, the news, whatever came on at 8 o'clock.
Not that long?
I think so. Because it would have been like late 90s or 2000. I think I watched it then.
Oh my gosh. I'm old.
I know. I didn't graduate till 2001. I'm just guessing. I have memories of that. Otherwise, it was some other show just like CSI.
Okay.
All right. So let's get another one out here. Ooh, this is a good one. What was the first book you ever read that you were not supposed to read?
Do you want to go first? Or?
I don't have a good answer for this, but I'll go first. That's fine. Because there was not really that expectation at my house. We just read a lot. And I remember my mom being like, you can read whatever you want. And that was just the way it was. So I remember there were books that I stumbled upon where I was like, oh, I shouldn't probably be reading this, but no one else was telling me. So it was kind of a self-censoring thing. Okay. If I felt like it was out of my league or wheelhouse, I would put it down, or I just wasn't getting stuff. But normally I read widely. I remember there being songs that I shouldn't be listening to, or places I shouldn't be on the internet, but that's all visual, or you're hearing it. So I think that's easier to control for parents.
Don't go on the M page of fanfiction.net.
Yeah, exactly. The reading's harder. They can't read every book you're reading, so it's kind of like, whatever, you can read whatever you want.
I had a similar upbringing with books. I mean, my parents weren't big censors. I mean, there's definitely some things they didn't like me watching. But the only real memory I have of something seeming forbidden to read was the film adaptation of The Virgin Suicides was coming out. So my dad and I were in the car. NPR was reading an excerpt of the book, and it was talking about one of the daughters trying to kill herself. And my dad I remember him turning off the radio.
Right.
Just
Like,
going,
this is a bad idea. You don't need this bad idea in your brain.
I have no idea why he did it.
Yeah.
Maybe he just felt uncomfortable. But for me, I'm then like, book you say, to the library.
Yeah. And you went straight, and that was the next book you checked out.
I'm not sure quite the next, but it was definitely something where I'm like, oh, I'm going to try to read this. And, as I got to be a teen, I started going to the adult section and reading Tom Perot's Election and being like 13, 14, realized like, it seems like I shouldn't be reading it, but who cares?
Now, we had talked briefly, like, you found anime and manga. Like, was there any manga that you got your hands on that you were not supposed to have your hands on?
Oh, lots.
Because I didn't have that experience. I literally didn't know what manga was.
Big fan of me being into it, but slight backstory: both my parents were in the military, so they lived in Okinawa for a bit. So I think their exposure to anime or manga is probably very different from what I sought out.
Okay,
but they had an idea of what it was, and my dad especially was like, "I don't know if I want you reading that," and my mom was more like, whatever, we know where she is, and she's not doing drugs or anything, so let her spend all of her money on comics.
And also, manga has a rating on the back. Our manga is like teen, older teen.
I was more into either the action stuff like Akira or I did love, I'm not a big romance person, but oh my god, Mars by Fuyumi, I can't say her last name, but Mars, god, I love that. Same with Paradise Kiss, and there was naked people in it, but I was just like, whatever.
It's a story, yeah.
I'm an adult. Leave me alone.
Awesome. All right, let's see. Last one. Okay, what was your most proud moment? You go first. While I try to think of a proud high school moment.
Most teenagers, I did not have a lot of proud moments, but I was bullied a lot in middle school.
Okay.
And again, I decided TV and books are my friends. I also started to get into movies. And around 8th grade, I discovered the movie Carrie.
Oh, yeah.
So we were allowed to wear our Halloween costumes to school. So in 8th grade, after 2 years of being bullied mercilessly, I'm like, I'm going to go to school as Carrie.
I love it.
And the people who bullied me actually flipped out. They're like, oh my God, Liz might try to kill us today. Which is like, no, but I just kind of figured it was like a symbol of don't push me around anymore.
Right. That's really cool.
And
it sounds empowering.
It was.
That you got to do that.
When you're a young bullied kid, Carrie is partially a fantasy.
Right.
So this was in October of 99, and I'm like, man, how did I get away with this in a post-Columbine world?
Right.
No idea.
Yeah, so I was going to ask you, like, the teachers didn't have a problem with it. They were just like,
no, because the teachers knew I wasn't the problem.
Yeah.
So fun postscript, though. I've met 2 actors from Carrie,
cool.
William Catt, who played Tommy Ross, and PJ Souls, who played the girl in the red hat. Told them both the story, and they both got a kick out of it. PJ Souls high-fived me.
That's awesome. That you'll cherish forever.
I will, definitely.
Okay, I'm trying to think of a proud moment. It's so hard because high school was just not full of pride for me. But there was something that was really happy making, and that was when I did creative writing, my like final, the 2 little things. I did creative writing my final year. And there was one moment, it actually wasn't creative writing, but it was humanities or something like that, where the teacher had us write sestinas, I believe. And she read the sestina to the class saying, this is definitely a publishable piece. And I think it's really wonderful, so I'd like you to read it out loud. So it was called Harmonica Time. I remember it was very interesting. And then I did the one honors award I got, when they have like the awards at the end of the year, the one I got was from my creative writing teacher. And she said it was for voice and narrative voice. And so I was so proud to get that I would not have cared about getting an honor from any class whatsoever, but because it was from Ms. Stahl and it was about having voice, I really, I cherish that so much. Aww. I didn't exactly know what she meant then, but I knew it was, I knew it was a compliment, and then I was really proud of it. So that was probably my 2 big ones. So, all right. Let's talk about our books. Hey. You read My Family Divided. What was it about?
This is actress Diane Guerrero. She's best known for Orange is the New Black. Her story of growing up in America with 2 undocumented parents. Okay. Her parents are deported when she is a teenager, and she's kind of forced to fend for herself, go to college, find out how to pay for college, build a career, all with her parents worlds away in Colombia and later her mother in Spain.
Oh, wow. Okay. Sounds interesting. And Don't Call Me Crazy it's literally 33 voices. So it's an anthology of written pieces and some art about mental health. And the idea is that it's starting the conversation about mental illness. It's not supposed to give you any, this is cut and dry. What I loved about it was the diversity of the voices, the diversity of thought around it. It's very cool. They go over a lot of different things: anxiety, paranoia, bipolar disorder, struggling with depression. It's all in here, written really well, and I thought it was such a wonderful collection, so I can't wait to talk about it. But I'm going to ask you your questions first.
Okay.
So I see Liz's book stack all the time, sometimes when they all come in at once. I know you read a lot of nonfiction, but I noticed that you don't read a lot of YA nonfiction normally. What have you read recently as far as nonfiction, and was this in line with your interests?
Currently, in terms of nonfiction, I'm actually working my way through a fiction book right now. It's a Afrofuturism short story collection.
Cool.
But for nonfiction, I'm reading Dope Sick by Beth Macy. I've wanted to read that for a while.
Saw that,
Recently, I've read Squeezed, One Person, No Vote, Poison City. They're American Prison. There have been a lot of good nonfiction books out there this year. This relates to my interest. I try to keep up on current events daily. My favorite podcast is The Majority Report, and that's a 5-day-a-week thing.
Okay, gotcha.
I've actually I've been following a specific case of a reproductive rights activist, Alejandra Pablos. She's had legal permanent residence, and she's now she's had her green card revoked.
Oh, really? Okay.
In order to be deported from she was arrested at a peaceful protest.
Oh my gosh. Okay, gotcha.
So this kind of fits into just trying to stay current on situations, but with current events, I always do like to see the kind of personal side of it.
Oh yeah, the personal story definitely is interesting.
Yeah, gives it more dimension.
Oh, for sure. All right, so in the intro, when we were talking about this book, you had mentioned it was based on an adult nonfiction book by the same author. Why do you think they made one for teens specifically? Why do you think they adapted it?
Okay, so towards the end of the book, Guerrero talks about when she finally went public with her family situation. And she got a lot of response. Some of it was, your typical terrible responses.
Oh, yeah.
A lot of people saying she
get out of the country and all that garbage.
Or people saying you should have been deported with them, which, nope, she was born here and not how that works.
Right.
But she said the biggest response she got was from a lot of people who said, this story is my story, or I know a young person who is going through this. So I think she and Erica Meraz adapted this for teens, specifically to reach teens who are going through a similar situation.
Okay, gotcha.
And I think that's a very wise idea because, she talks about being a teen. She didn't know what her rights were. She didn't know where to go. She didn't know who to contact. And so
right. It really is the viewpoint of the teenager going through that there.
Yeah. When her parents were taken away, she basically stayed in the house and didn't answer the door for anybody for hours because she was like, I don't know what to do.
Did they give her like a CASA volunteer or anybody? Nope. How old was she? She just was left there?
She just had family, and she basically stayed with some family and some friends until she reached the age of 18.
Yeah, that would have been very scary.
It was.
Okay. So I have a question, and I know neither of us are educators, right? Mm-hmm. But when I see books like this, I think this could work really well in a classroom, and it seems really accessible to teens, and they might have extra interest in it because it's like a star, a person who they see in a lot of different ways. Do you think that one, it would be good in a classroom? Like, would they be able to have a good discussion if they read this book? And if not, are there other texts that would be better? Because to me, it seems like a natural shoo-in for interest for teens and also educational.
Yeah, I think you could have a very good discussion with it. And I don't know how many kids watch Orange is the New Black.
That's true, but I do know some. I mean, especially in the older teen. Yeah, 100%.
I think there's a good discussion to be had about it. In terms of books about immigrant, I can't actually think of
other books that
off
would
the
fit
top
that.
of my head. But I think in terms of discussing the human factor, not just we're going to debate, one class debates one side, one class debates the other. to look at how does this policy affect real people, I think this is a very useful text to say, okay, this is how one person was affected by this.
Interesting.
And I think sometimes if you put a human face on these issues, it gets a lot harder just to see it as
not your problem.
Not your problem. And it's harder to see it as, we're two teams trying to see who wins.
Right, exactly. Think about that same classroom question, because when they change things for teen readers, I don't know if you got a chance to look at the adult version of this, but what made it accessible for, what makes it accessible for teens? Is there more white space? Do you think the language is different? Are there,
I've noticed the language is different.
Okay.
I was able to fly through this book.
Breeze through it. Okay.
And the chapters are short. And she discusses things like, going through puberty and my mom wasn't there. And that's something I think that's very relatable. It's hard enough going through it when your mom is there.
I know. And do you think that the other one was probably more dense or went into a lot of her adulthood more?
I think this is just a guess as I didn't read it, but she does talk about going, apparently depression runs in her family. Her brother dealt with it, but she went through a very bad period of depression. And I can only assume that her book just basically delves more into everything and maybe more into stuff that might not be, I guess, kid-friendly, so to speak.
Right. And with the depression, I'm glad she talked about it in that book, but, that doesn't necessarily disappear anytime. It could crop up for all of us at any time.
Yep.
So she might also talk about that more in
Probably
her adult novel.
In this book, and I'll talk about it. I guess I can talk about it now, but yeah. I guess one of my issues with it was some of the issues, like her depression, it was 1 or 2 chapters, and then it's, and I got counseling, I'm on to this thing. But again, I keep remembering this is a book written with 13, 14-year-olds in mind.
Right. Because I was going to say, is there something that you wish was in there that wasn't? And that seems like one of the things. Mm-hmm. Was there anything else?
I wish she'd gone maybe a little bit more into what types of resources were a bit available, but she does have a list at the back of the book.
Okay, I was going to say, is there any resource pages on the back?
There are, thankfully.
Great. Okay, awesome. So out of 5, what do you think you'd get it? 5 stars being the best, 1 being not your favorite. It sounds like you kind of liked it.
I liked it. I'd give it a 4. I mean, as I said, it's a little, I kind of wish she had delved a little bit more, but
I know.
You have to look at the audience. I just think this book is really good, as I said earlier, putting a human face on these things. I think sometimes when we talk about a lot of politics, we talk about it in terms of hypotheticals or abstracts, and we don't realize that there are very real people being affected by this right now. And this helps humanize
I mean,
this issue for a lot of people, especially up here in New Hampshire, you don't see what's happening every day.
Right. I know, exactly.
And, it might help people develop some empathy.
Right, because I think sometimes when people are afraid of, here come immigrants, they're going to take everything from me. But it's like, okay, well, once you get down to the human interests, this person loves, this type of food, or we both have interests in this sort of hobby.
Her book dispels a lot of myths as well. Her parents didn't come here because free stuff was available. In fact, a lot of people who come here and aren't documented, they don't want to sign up for aid because they're like, we'll get caught. They came here because where they lived wasn't a lot of opportunity. Mm-hmm. It wasn't a good place to live, and they wanted to raise their kids somewhere better, which is, I think, what a lot of people want.
That's what everyone wants.
I think everyone just look at this and maybe we need a more humane approach to this situation.
Absolutely. Okay, awesome. That sounds like a great book. Mm-hmm. All right. So don't call me crazy. Don't being in parentheticals.
So do I ask you the questions?
Yeah, go ahead and you ask me some questions and I'll tell you what I know.
Okay. So question 1, this book is an anthology, as you mentioned.
Yes.
Lots of different voices and stories. If you had to choose one story, which one stood out the most?
Can I choose 2?
Yes.
Okay. I mean, I actually loved most of them. I don't think there was one where I was like, skip or anything like that. But there were 2 that really drew me in. And one was called Coda by Meredith Rousseau. And she was talking about going to, into basically what is it, rehab if you're going there for mental health? No, it's
I would say almost say institutionalized.
It's not well, I guess it kind of is, yeah, and it was scary, but it's not in the way you would see it in a movie that is terrifying, and we'll talk about that later. But it was intense because she's trans And she was struggling with dysphoria as well as, other things that she had come in on. And first of all, they used her dead name. Ooh. And they used her they kept talking to her with the wrong pronouns. Ugh. So that was obviously unpleasant.
Misgendering hurts people.
And you could read, when you were reading the text, you could see this pain and feel this pain. And then they wouldn't let her shave her face. She was like, so here I am, and I already wasn't feeling well, and now I'm feeling much worse because you are basically making me feel like I'm not who I am. Yeah. And so she was really struggling with the dysphoria of that. And I think, I don't know, it was the writing. It was just bringing me in so closely to her emotions. I just felt terrible for her. And she had these important points to make that it was completely inappropriate. And then also, though, an ally showed up. There was a staff member who was like, hey, you can't do this. She needs to be able to shave her face. And they mentioned, like, you can't shave your armpits and legs because not everybody gets a razor. But, you get to do this and then we'll be good. So it's not giving you extra privileges compared to the other female people here. It's just, we're just doing this to help you. And so that was a fascinating one. Then Call Me Crazy was the last one in the book. I learned something from it. I thought it was a really interesting perspective. It was a fascinating voice. And I'll talk a little bit more about that one when I get to a little later on in our conversation. But I just loved it. It was my favorite.
All right. So, and I'm guilty of this as well.
Sure, make me feel better, Liz.
Did you hold any kind of biases, or I guess I should say outdated ideas about mental health before kind of reading this and learning about this stuff? And did any of these stories help you challenge some of your, preconceived notions?
I was 100% sure. I was like, no, I'm not gonna. This isn't a learning experience for me. I just want to hear all these voices. And I was feeling really confident all the way till the end when I got to that one by S.E. Smith. And then I realized I had done a thing that is so not cool that has just been ingrained. And so she starts talking about language, right? And usually I'm like, I'm great with the language, people first language. But she said, and it came up multiple times, but when she said it, it just hit me like, oh, Erin, you're wrong on this. You've done this. This is not good. And it's that instead of saying someone is disabled, I've said they're differently abled, to sort of soften it almost. Because I always grew up with the idea, and not, I don't know where it even came from, that like saying disabled really hurts. Well, it hurts somebody's feelings. Yeah. I'm not thinking of it more as a technical term, but as a insult almost. Oh. So I would change it to say like, like I'm abled and this person's differently abled, right? So I was reading it and I was like, oh, yeah, I never thought of that. She said, this kind of language makes actually being disabled seem like an insult, and you're trying to cutify it almost by changing your language around it. And I had not realized that before. So I will change that because I don't know where it even came from.
I don't know. Actually, we have my brother has a mental disability. So for us, disabled always was just like, it's a technical term. It's not a good or a bad. It's just very matter of fact. So I never even...
Yeah, wouldn't have come. Yeah. It's just one of those, like, I'm ignorant of it, and I didn't realize I was. So, and if I had grown up more with that on my radar, I probably wouldn't oh, yeah, disabled, yeah. That's just the technical term we use. Yeah. But I don't know. It just seemed like I don't want to insult anybody. And I was being careful with my language, but actually maybe insulting somebody by being careful with my language. Wow. So, yeah, it was interesting. I learned a lot.
Kind of going off the language discussion, disability and mental health advocates and activists have talked about how words like crazy and insane and how they contribute to ableism and the general stigma against mental health. Did this book go into that at all? I assume it kind of did with the title. Right.
Oh, yeah. And what I loved about it was there were a lot of different viewpoints on it, actually. So I definitely, professionals, always say use people first language. That's what I try to do. Instead, that would be for the listener who doesn't know, instead of saying this person's bipolar, you would be saying this person has bipolar disorder, because you don't say this person is cancer. This person has cancer. So it's the people first language. What's really cool was
Unless
listening
you're
to
talking
these.
about the astrological side.
Right. What was really cool was just the different viewpoints. I wanted to kind of highlight a couple of them because I have the passages marked about what to call a person who has whatever. And people had specific things they would prefer. Yeah. So Mike Young, I love the ending of his, and I do know Mike, so I knew I was going to love his piece anyway. But the ending I just love because he really just straight out said, "Call me this, don't call me that." So he has, don't call autism a disease. It shouldn't be something that is in need of curing because you're saying like what I have is curable instead of something that is good. And this is such an innate part of me that I feel like is a good part of me. Having it be seen as not desirable is saying that I'm not desirable. But he says, there are plenty of other things you're welcome to call me, though. Call me a husband and father. Call me someone who tries to be a good friend. Call me a children's author and a future librarian. Call me disabled. Call me neurodivergent. Call me human. I am, I may be different in some ways from non-autistic people. I'm different in some ways from every other autistic person, too. And whatever those differences may be, I'm 100% human. Call me autistic. Don't call me Mikey, though. I hate that. So I thought it was great. And then Heidi Heilig, I hope I pronounced her name right. I feel bad about that because I have met her as well. What I thought was interesting about hers is she actually called her crazy. She was like, oh, well, my crazy is like this. Oh. And so I thought that was interesting because I don't usually hear it that way. And then at the end, S.E. Smith is like, call me crazy, because she actually, feels it kind of as a badge of honor. And she goes, that's because I am crazy. Looney Tunes, bananas, bonkers, stark raving mad, certifiable, insane, loco, nuts, psycho. You're not going to hurt my feelings if you tell it like it is. Although my psychiatrist always looks faintly dismayed when I call myself crazy. But then she also calls, sanies. She's like, we're not more dangerous than sanies, which is true. And so I loved her piece. That was the one I learned from. But her voice. So you could see a lot of the different writers had different ways of using the language. I would always use a people first language approach, but if someone who has bipolar disorder and is struggling with bipolar disorder chooses to reclaim that word and say, I'm crazy, that's totally different.
Who's the woman who wrote Marbles? Ellen Foray?
Forney.
And
yeah. Yes, and I love her books too. So it definitely contributes. I hope people pick it up and have that same conversation.
Great. Well, it actually kind of leads into question 4. I know the book's aimed at teens, but would you recommend this to adults? Because and I know we've talked about this off air, but I think there's some adults who have just a very archaic, limited view of mental illness, and they kind of have that, what do you have to be sad about?
Right.
Do you think, and they almost dismiss concerns about mental health. Do you think this could help open up a conversation at the very least with some adults who might want to learn?
I do. Yeah. For the ones who would be willing to pick it up. I think it would be great for anybody. You have to remember it's written by adults. They're reflecting oftentimes on their adolescence, but oftentimes it just feels general. It's a conversation about language we're using. So that isn't even about, hey, I was 16 and this happened. I think the challenge would be convincing some adults that it's worthy, because there's always that like, oh, this is a teen book, so I'm not looking for a teen book. And it's like, well, wait, but look, it has all these gems in it, and you might love it. You might learn something. And it also does have some familiar names, which might help it, but might not among adults. Like there's Nancy Kerrigan is in here. There's also one of the actors from Modern Family who talks about body dysmorphia. And then there was also, the Twilight girl. I think that's who it was. What's her name? The one who played...
There's a couple of them.
The lead character in Twilight.
Oh, wait, Kirsten Stewart's in there?
No. I'm thinking of the other... Belle. She's not in Twilight, but what's her name?
Emma Watson?
Bell? No.
You said Belle.
Kristen Bell. Bell. What's she do? You know Kristen Bell.
Oh, she's on The Good Place.
Oh, Kristen Bell. She has blonde hair.
Blonde hair,
occasionally. Yeah. She's in here
I'm
as well.
Oh, God, is she in The Good Place? If I could think of someone else.
Well, Kristen Bell is in here as well. So you have some actors and actresses who would be familiar to teens, but again, maybe adults would, oh, well, that's like for, teen pop culture. I'm not interested. You're like, wait, but no.
Everyone should be interested in the Good Place.
Seriously. So I would think that there's plenty to learn, but it really would be the selling point. I'd have to be able to sell it to that patron or that reader.
Final question. What do you think we as librarians can do to foster healthy environment and open up dialogue about mental illness?
Okay, so well, first of all, making sure the collection's robust, right? We want these books on our shelves, which we do. I think we're pretty solid here at Dairy. Yeah. We keep up on it. Weeding out the old stuff because the old stuff is not helping anyone.
No,
Got to get that off the shelves. You need new titles. There's lots of new titles.
As one of our coworkers would say, curate the collection.
Yes, exactly. I think also putting out displays is good. I think April or May is Mental Health Awareness Month. I always put out a teen display during that month, and I also put out resources with that book display. That book display goes like rapid fire. It really moves. And I do fiction titles and nonfiction titles. So there's resources, and then there's books with characters who are struggling. And then I also think knowing the local resources is helpful because we often will have patrons who might need the local resources. And then you're like, okay, where do I send this person? And you don't want to be struggling to find that right there in that moment. But, Center for Life Management is in Derry. So having that on our radar. And then I was also thinking maybe like staff development stuff.
Oh, good.
Right? So if we could do anything around mental health with librarians, maybe like a mental health first aid is always a good thing to do. And we have not done that, but we could do that sometime.
When I went to, I used to work at another library, West Haven down in Connecticut. We did do mental health first aid training, and it's incredibly eye-opening.
Yeah. So I think that would be some good ways to just say, hey, the library is a good place for this, and we're not going to, shun you or stigmatize you or question you if you come to the desk and be judgmental. We don't for any question. We really don't. People are often like, oh, I'm here for this. And then there's that kind of like cowering look. We don't care. We're going to help you find the book.
Oh, exactly. So, I mean, I was about to say, you should look at what I read and watch.
I
don't judge.
We're not judging. No. So, all right. Well, that is it for us. Don't call me crazy. 33 Voices start the conversation about mental health and My Family Divided by Diane Guerrero. Those were great books. I'm glad we got to read some nonfiction. So that concludes our Teen Title Talk for this week. Liz, thanks so much for joining me.
You're welcome.
Next time, I'll have my friend and YA author Audie Rule along for the ride. She'll be reading Attack of the 50-Foot Wallflower, and I'll be reading The Phantom Wheel. Those are both sci-fi novels because Audie loves sci-fi, and I actually get a kick out of sci-fi too. Remember, if you get a chance to answer our 3 questions, those are, what was the first book you ever read that you weren't supposed to? Or, teens, what are you reading now, and are you okay reading it? Are your parents okay with you reading it? What was your most proud moment of high school, and has it happened yet? If not, I really hope I'm sure it's on its way, so don't worry about that. And the last
likely it'll
one
happen in your 20s or 30s.
That's right. Maybe, yeah. I mean, you're going to have prouder moments, but that's okay. Also, what was your favorite show? What's your favorite show now? If you're an older listener, what was your favorite show back then? We would love to hear from any of you. You can email us at teentitletalk@gmail.com. We would be happy to read your answer on the air if you send us something. So that does it.
All right. Thanks for joining us at Teen Title Talk. This podcast is brought to you by the Derry Public Library and DCAM Derry Community Access Media. Our music was composed by Bandit Starling.
Until next time.
Bye.
Bye.